I tell the story of stepping in when my sister disappeared, raising her baby through sleepless nights, school struggles, and quiet victories. Years later, when she returned, sober and demanding her son back, I was forced to face the pain of loving a child who was never legally mine, and the impossible choice between my heart and his future.
They say a mother's love is instinctual, born from the first breath, the first cry. But what if that love isn't biological? What if it's forged in sleepless nights, in scraped knees kissed better, in every tiny victory and heartbreaking defeat shared with a child who, by blood, isn't yours? What if that love, as fierce and undeniable as any, is suddenly threatened? This isn't just a story about family. It's about the raw, visceral terror of losing the very core of your existence. It's about a choice no one should ever have to make. I remember the day it all started, though I didn't know then the irreversible path it would set me on. It was a Tuesday like any other, until it wasn't. The phone rang, a frantic, almost unintelligible voice on the other end. It was my sister, Sarah. She was crying, barely coherent, something about needing to leave, needing a fresh start, and a baby, her baby, my nephew. He was just a few months old, a tiny bundle of innocence named Ethan. Just for a little while, she'd pleaded, her voice a thin, reedy whisper that still haunts my quiet moments. I just need to get myself together. He's better off with you, Mia. Please, just for a little while. A little while stretched into weeks, then months, then years. And with each passing day, with every lullaby sung and every tear wiped away, Ethan stopped being my nephew and became simply my son. He called me Mama. It was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard, a sacred symphony that resonated deep within my soul, anchoring me, defining me. I was his mama. I nurtured him. I guided him. I cheered for him. I knew the exact shade of green in his eyes when he was curious, the way his nose crinkled when he laughed, the particular comfort of his small hand gripping my finger. I knew his fears, his dreams, the subtle shifts in his mood, and the silent language of his heart. He was mine. Not by birth certificate or legal decree, but by every fiber of my being, by every ounce of love I poured into him. And then, one crisp autumn afternoon, just as Ethan was turning 8, just as we were picking out his Halloween costume, the doorbell rang. It was Sarah. Not the ghost of Sarah I'd sometimes seen in my dreams, haunted and distant. This was a different Sarah, clean, composed, dressed in clothes that fit, her eyes clear, though still holding a flicker of something I couldn't quite place, perhaps a fragile hope, perhaps a steel-cold determination. My heart lurched, a cold, sickening drop. For 8 years I had lived with a low hum of anxiety, a constant unspoken fear that this day might come. But no amount of dread could have prepared me for the actual sight of her, standing there, a stranger, and yet irrevocably tied to me. Ethan, ever the curious one, peeked around my legs. "Who's that, Mama?" he asked, his voice bright, innocent, utterly unaware of the seismic shift that was about to fracture our world. Sarah looked at him, a strange, possessive warmth in her gaze, and then she looked at me, a silent challenge passing between us. "I'm here to take my son home, Mia," she said, her voice steady, devoid of the old pleas, carrying the weight of a decree. My breath hitched. The words were a physical blow, an ice pick to the chest. My son? No, Ethan was my son. Every molecule of my being screamed it. My vision blurred. The world around me seemed to tilt on its axis. The vibrant autumn leaves outside the window suddenly looked dull. The crisp air felt heavy, suffocating. In that moment, standing on my own doorstep, watching the woman who had walked away all those years ago now stand before me, whole and demanding, I felt the cold grip of a primal fear, the fear of losing someone you raised and loved as your own, the fear of having your heart ripped out piece by agonizing piece and handed over to someone else. The fear that everything I had built, everything I had become, was about to be undone, and the terrifying realization that this wasn't just about me or Sarah, it was about Ethan, caught in a battle he didn't understand, a battle between two mothers, each claiming a right to his tender heart. The story you're about to hear is my story. It's the story of how I found myself facing the impossible choice between my heart and his future, a choice that tore my world apart and rebuilt it in ways I never could have imagined.
My sister, Sarah, and I grew up in a small town, a place where everyone knew everyone, and family ties were meant to be unbreakable. Our parents, hardworking and traditional, instilled in us a strong sense of duty and loyalty. I was the older sister, always a bit more grounded, a little more cautious. Sarah, on the other hand, was a whirlwind, beautiful, charismatic, with a sparkle in her eye that drew people in, but also a restlessness, a wild streak that often got her into trouble. From an early age, I found myself stepping into a protective role for Sarah. When she'd miss curfew, I'd cover for her. When she'd forget an assignment, I'd help her scramble to finish. It wasn't a burden, not really. It felt natural, a part of who I was. I loved her fiercely, despite our differences. I just always wished she'd find the same stability that brought me comfort. After high school, I settled into a comfortable rhythm. I found a job I liked, bought a small house with a big garden, and dreamed of a future that felt safe and predictable. Marriage, children, a quiet life filled with simple joys. Sarah, however, yearned for something more, something wilder. She moved to the city, chasing dreams that seemed to constantly shift and elude her. We'd talk on the phone, her stories a dizzying mix of new adventures, new friends, and always, just beneath the surface, a hint of chaos. She'd come home occasionally, usually for holidays, bringing with her an energy that both invigorated and exhausted me. We'd laugh, we'd reminisce, but there was always a sense that she was living on the edge of something. I'd try to offer advice, to anchor her, but she'd shrug it off, telling me I worried too much. The calls started to become less frequent, more strained. Then came the phone call that changed everything. Sarah was pregnant. I was shocked, but also hopeful. Perhaps this was it, I thought. Perhaps this new life would be the anchor she needed, the responsibility that would finally bring her peace. I offered my unwavering support, reminding her that she wasn't alone. But motherhood didn't bring her the stability I'd hoped for. Instead, it seemed to amplify her struggles. The father of the baby was out of the picture, a fleeting romance that dissolved as quickly as it began. Sarah was overwhelmed, isolated, and soon the old patterns began to resurface, intensified by the demands of a newborn. She struggled with postpartum depression, which quickly spiraled into something darker, something she tried to hide from me, but I could hear it in the tremor of her voice, the evasiveness in her answers. Then came that Tuesday, the day my world shattered and reformed itself. The frantic call, her voice thin and trembling, asking me to take Ethan.
"I just can't, Mia," she'd sobbed. "I'm not well. I'm not safe. He deserves better." I didn't hesitate, not for a second. The idea of my tiny nephew, barely 3 months old, being in an unstable environment was unthinkable. I drove the 3 hours to the city in a blur of worry and adrenaline. When I arrived at her tiny, cluttered apartment, the air heavy with neglect, I found Sarah a shadow of her former self. Gaunt, hollow-eyed, she handed Ethan to me as if he were made of glass, her movements slow and fragile. He was so small, swaddled in a worn blanket, his eyes wide and curious, mirroring my own fear and confusion. "Just for a little while, Mia," she repeated, her voice barely a whisper. "I promise I'll come back for him when I'm better. I just need to get clean. I need to get help." I hugged her, a desperate, silent plea for her to get well, to come back. I didn't fully grasp the depth of her addiction then, or the long, arduous road to recovery she faced. I just knew I had to protect this innocent child. I drove Ethan home that night, a tiny human entrusted to my care, his soft breathing the only sound in the car. My small house, once a haven of quiet solitude, was about to be transformed. I had no children of my own, no experience with newborns beyond babysitting a cousin years ago. But as I looked at his sleeping face in the rearview mirror, a profound sense of purpose washed over me. He needed me, and in a way I didn't yet understand, I needed him too. That first night was a blur of fear and determination. I Googled everything: how to change a diaper, safe sleep for infants, what does a baby cry mean? I learned quickly, driven by an instinct I didn't know I possessed. I set up a crib in my spare room, bought tiny clothes, and filled my fridge with baby food. My friends and family, understanding the gravity of the situation, rallied around me with support, advice, and practical help. But even with their kindness, the responsibility was immense, all-consuming. Sarah called occasionally at first, brief, strained conversations, promises to visit that never materialized, excuses. Then the calls stopped. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. My parents, heartbroken by Sarah's disappearance, tried to find her, but she had vanished, swallowed by the anonymous streets of the city. The legalities were hazy. I wasn't a foster parent, not officially. I was just her Aunt Mia, who had stepped in when her mother couldn't. There were no official papers, no adoption forms, just a silent, unspoken understanding that for now, Ethan was mine. And so I became Mama, his mama. Every day was a lesson, every challenge a test of my resolve. From the first smiles to the first steps, the first words to the first day of kindergarten, I was there. I was his constant, his protector, his world. My life, once meticulously planned, had been derailed, rerouted, and then beautifully, impossibly redefined by the love I had for this little boy. I didn't just raise him, he raised me too, transforming me into the person I was always meant to be. I was a mother in every way that mattered, and I believed with all my heart that he was mine. The years with Ethan weren't just a blur of sleepless nights and endless chores. They were a tapestry woven with joy, laughter, and an unbreakable bond. My days revolved around him. His kindergarten drawings, proudly displayed on the fridge, were masterpieces. His first wobbly bike ride, a triumph I cheered louder for than any personal achievement. Every school play, every parent-teacher conference, every flu season spent nursing him back to health, these were the moments that solidified my motherhood. He truly was a wonderful child, curious, kind, with a mischievous twinkle in his eyes that reminded me, sometimes painfully, of Sarah. But that resemblance was fleeting, because in every other way, he was a testament to the love and stability I poured into him. He thrived. He was happy. He was mine. Yet, beneath the surface of our idyllic life, a quiet storm was always brewing. It wasn't just the memory of Sarah, it was the unspoken truth of her absence. We didn't hide her from Ethan. I showed him pictures, told him stories about his birth mother Sarah, keeping them gentle and age-appropriate. "Your mama Sarah loves you very much," I'd say, even as the words felt like a betrayal to the fierce love I held for him. "She's just on a long journey to find herself right now." As Ethan grew, so did his questions, innocent at first. "Where is Mama Sarah?" he'd ask, his brow furrowed with curiosity. "Will she come back soon?" My heart would clench, a familiar ache. How do you explain addiction, despair, and abandonment to a child? How do you explain the betrayal of a sister without betraying the child's burgeoning understanding of family? I'd tell him she was getting better, getting strong. I'd tell him she was working on herself so she could be the best mama for him one day. These were half-truths uttered with a heavy heart, hoping to protect him from the harsh realities that I had to face. I wanted him to love his birth mother, even in her absence, but I also wanted him to feel secure knowing I was his present, his constant. The legal gray area was a constant source of anxiety. I had consulted a lawyer early on, but without Sarah's consent or a clear indication of abandonment through legal channels, formal adoption was a long, expensive, and uncertain road. The lawyer advised me to document everything, every contact attempt, every expense, every milestone. I meticulously kept a journal, a ledger of our life, both a testament to my dedication and a shield against the inevitable. It felt clinical, cold to record the precious moments of Ethan's life as legal evidence, but the fear of losing him spurred me on. There were brief, unsettling reappearances from Sarah, a voicemail, slurred and desperate after nearly 2 years of silence, a postcard with an unfamiliar address, a hastily scrawled "thinking of you" that felt more like a ghost's message than a mother's message. Each time my stomach would knot, a wave of hope quickly drowned by the familiar dread. Was this it? Was she coming back? Was she getting better? The answers were always elusive, leaving me in a limbo of uncertainty. One time, when Ethan was 5, I saw her. I was at the grocery store, pushing Ethan in the cart, and I saw her standing by the frozen foods aisle. My heart leaped into my throat. She looked different, thinner, her eyes shadowed. She didn't see me. I ducked behind a stack of cereal boxes, gripping Ethan's hand, my mind racing. Should I approach her? Should I tell her about Ethan, about how wonderful he was? But fear paralyzed me. What if she was still unwell? What if she tried to take him then and there? What if seeing her would confuse Ethan, destabilize him? I watched her, a stranger in her own skin, until she drifted away. I went home, shaken, and held Ethan a little tighter that night, promising myself I would do everything to protect our fragile world. The emotional strain was immense. I was constantly walking a tightrope. On one side, the fierce, protective love for Ethan, the joy of raising him. On the other, the gnawing anxiety of Sarah's potential return, the legal vulnerabilities, the ethical dilemma of raising a child whose mother was technically still alive and legally his parent. I often felt isolated in this unique burden. My friends tried to understand, but how could they truly grasp the weight of raising a child who could be taken from you at any moment? My parents were too heartbroken over Sarah's struggles to fully support my legal quest, always holding on to the hope of her recovery, which I understood, but which left me feeling exposed. I tried to confide in a close friend once, detailing my fear. "What if she comes back and demands him?" I whispered, my voice thick with unshed tears. "What if she's better and a court decides he belongs with his biological mother?" My friend just held my hand, her eyes full of sympathy, but without answers. There were no easy answers. These anxieties subtly permeated our daily life. I would linger a little longer at the school gate, a protective vigilance in my gaze. I would sometimes stare at Ethan as he slept, his chest rising and falling gently, and a wave of pure, agonizing love would wash over me, mingled with the bitter taste of impending loss. Every milestone, every happy memory was tinged with the awareness that it might not be mine to keep. As Ethan turned 8, he was becoming more independent, more aware. His questions about Mama Sarah were less frequent, but more pointed. He was starting to piece things together, the gaps in his story. I could see the gears turning in his bright young mind. The time was coming, I knew. Either he would seek her out, or she would somehow find her way back to us. And I knew with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that when that day came, our lives would be irrevocably changed. I just didn't know how, or how much it would hurt.
The call came on a Tuesday afternoon, a seemingly ordinary day. I was grading papers, the comforting scent of freshly brewed coffee filling my kitchen. Leo was at school, and the house was quiet, a rare moment of peace I usually cherished. The caller ID showed an unfamiliar number, a city code I hadn't seen in years. My heart started to hammer against my ribs, a premonition, cold and sharp. "Alice, is that you?" The voice was hesitant, softer than I remembered, but undeniably Clara's. I dropped my red pen. It clattered to the floor, a jarring sound in the sudden stillness. My blood ran cold, then hot. Disbelief, anger, a flicker of something almost like hope. They all warred within me. 7 years. 7 years of silence, of wondering, of raising her son, and now this? Clara? My voice was barely a whisper. I braced myself, clutching the phone so tightly my knuckles were white. "Where have you been?" Her answer was a torrent of apologies, explanations, justifications. She'd been sick, she said, really sick. Addiction, recovery, therapy, finding herself. She spoke of hitting rock bottom, of a long, arduous climb back to sobriety, of wanting to be a better person. Her words sounded rehearsed, like lines from a script. I listened, numb, tears welling in my eyes, not for her story, but for the life she had so casually walked away from. "I'm clean now, Alice, for over 3 years," she said, her voice gaining strength, conviction. "I have a job, an apartment. I'm ready. I want to see Leo." The world tilted. My carefully constructed reality, built on the unwavering foundation of my love for Leo, began to crack. "See him?" I repeated, the words tasting like ash. "Clara, he's 7 years old. He knows me as his mother. You can't just waltz back in and demand to see him." There was a pause, a chill that seeped through the phone line. "He's my son, Alice," she said, her voice hardening, losing its hesitant quality. "My biological son, I'm his mother, and I want him back." That was it, the pronouncement. The sword of Damocles that had been hanging over my head for 7 years had finally fallen. The air left my lungs in a ragged gasp. My vision blurred. "Back?" I choked out, feeling lightheaded. "You abandoned him, Clara. You left him with me, a baby. I raised him. Every scraped knee, every first word, every school play, I was there. You think you can just take him back like a forgotten sweater?" The conversation devolved into a shouting match, raw and ugly. She accused me of trying to steal her child, of holding him hostage. I accused her of unimaginable selfishness, of parental neglect. Each word was a poisoned arrow striking deep. My parents tried to mediate, their faces etched with pain and exhaustion, caught between their 2 daughters. They loved Clara, but they had also witnessed my sacrifices, my unwavering dedication to Leo. Clara, emboldened by her newfound sobriety and a surprising confidence, started sending official letters, legal documents. Her name was on the birth certificate.
She had a lawyer. She had rights. My heart hammered with a sickening dread. I had poured my entire being into raising Leo, but on paper I was just his aunt, his guardian, a temporary placeholder. The day she first came to my house demanding to see Leo is seared into my memory. He had just come home from school, bouncing through the door, his backpack slung over one shoulder, a bright drawing clutched in his hand. "Mom, look what I made!" he'd yelled, his face alight. Then he saw her. Clara stood on my porch, looking healthier, dressed neatly, a slight, nervous smile on her face. Leo stopped dead, his eyes wide, confused. He looked at me, then at her, then back at me, a silent question in his innocent gaze. "Leo, honey," I managed, my voice trembling, "this is your Aunt Clara." Clara knelt down, her smile widening. "No, honey, I'm your birth mommy. I've come back for you." Her words were soft, yet they struck me like a physical blow. Leo's face crumpled. He looked utterly bewildered, scared. He clutched his drawing tighter, backing into me, seeking the familiar comfort of my leg. He didn't know her, not really. She was a ghost from a story I'd told him, not a living, breathing person making impossible demands. His confusion, his fear, tore at my soul. This wasn't about me anymore, or Clara. It was about him, caught in a battle he couldn't possibly understand. That night, after Clara had reluctantly left, promising to return with her lawyer, Leo cried. He pressed his face into my chest, his small body shaking. "Mommy, who was that lady? Why did she say she was my mommy? You're my mommy." I held him, tears streaming down my face, the raw pain of the situation overwhelming me. "Yes, baby," I whispered, my voice choked with emotion. "I am your mommy, and I always will be." But even as I said the words, a cold dread coiled in my stomach. I knew, deep down, that love alone wasn't enough to fight the cold, unyielding hand of the law. My heart was breaking, not just for myself, but for the impossible choice I knew was coming, a choice that would rip Leo's world and mine apart.
The major turning point wasn't just a single day or a single confrontation. It was the start of a protracted, agonizing war. A war not of armies, but of hearts, of legal documents, and of a child caught in the crossfire. The weeks and months that followed Clara's return were a relentless siege on my peace of mind, on our fragile family unit, and most tragically on Leo's innocent spirit. Clara, true to her word, returned with her lawyer, a polished, steely-eyed woman who spoke in legal jargon, turning my deepest love into a mere custody dispute. They argued that Clara was now sober, stable, employed, and therefore, legally, the rightful parent. My years of dedication, my every sacrifice, were reduced to providing care in the absence of the biological mother. The phrasing itself felt like a slap in the face. My own lawyer, a kind-hearted man named Mr. Henderson, tried his best, but the legal landscape was bleak. "Alice," he'd explain, his voice gentle but firm, "unless we can prove she's an unfit parent now, or that you have a formal adoption in place, the court will almost always side with the biological mother, especially if she's demonstrating recovery and stability." The weight of those words was crushing. I had no formal adoption. I had believed in a different kind of bond, a bond forged in love, not paperwork. A naive belief, perhaps, but it was all I had known. The legal battles bled into our daily lives, casting a dark shadow over everything. Clara was granted supervised visitation rights initially, then unsupervised, slowly increasing her time with Leo. Each visit felt like a piece of my heart being torn away.
I tried to prepare Leo, to explain in simple terms that Clara was his first mommy and that she wanted to spend time with him, but how do you explain such complex adult pain to a 7-year-old? Leo became quiet, withdrawn. He stopped telling me about his day with the same enthusiasm. His artwork, once so vibrant, turned subdued, often featuring 2 stick figures holding hands, one much larger than the other, with a third, smaller figure standing awkwardly to the side. He'd come back from visits with Clara, sometimes confused, sometimes sullen, sometimes asking questions that pierced me to the core. "Mommy, why did Aunt Clara say I was supposed to live with her?" Or, "She said she missed me. Did she really?" The emotional pain was a constant companion. It was the ache in my chest that never went away, the knot in my stomach that tightened with every phone call, every court date. I couldn't sleep, replaying conversations in my head, analyzing every word Clara said, every move she made. My appetite vanished. My vibrant classroom, once my sanctuary, now felt like a stage where I had to perform, to pretend that my world wasn't collapsing around me. My students, perceptive little beings, noticed. "Are you okay, Miss Alice?" one of them asked once, her brow furrowed with concern. I just managed a tight smile and said I was fine. My parents were caught in the middle, their loyalty divided, their hearts broken. They loved Clara, their daughter, and were overjoyed by her sobriety, but they also saw the devastation she was causing, the pain she inflicted on me and on Leo. Family dinners became strained, punctuated by tense silences and careful avoidance of the topic. It was a betrayal from within, a fracturing of the very foundation of our family. The worst moment came when the court ordered a gradual transition plan for Leo to move in with Clara. A phased approach, they called it, a slow tearing away. First overnight visits, then weekends, then alternating weeks. Each step felt like a new turn of the knife. I would pack his small suitcase, meticulously folding his favorite shirts, tucking in his well-loved stuffed animal, my hands trembling. Leo would stand beside me, his eyes wide and scared, clinging to my leg a little tighter each time. "Mommy, don't make me go," he'd whisper, and my heart would shatter anew. But I had no choice. Legally, I had exhausted every avenue. I had to follow the court order, or risk even more drastic consequences. The house became an empty shell during the weeks he was gone. I'd wander through his room, touching his untouched toys, smelling the faint scent of him on his pillow. The silence was deafening, suffocating. I felt a loss so profound it was physical, a gaping hole in my chest where my son, my life used to be. I was isolated, consumed by grief, unable to fully function. Friends tried to reach out, but what could they say? How could they understand? I tried to maintain a brave face for Leo, to reassure him, to make the transition as easy as possible for him. "Mommy will always be here, honey," I'd tell him, my voice cracking. "I'll always be your mommy." But the words felt hollow even to me. I was losing him, slowly, irrevocably, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. The betrayal wasn't just Clara's, it was the system's for reducing a lifetime of love to a technicality. It was the crushing weight of knowing that sometimes love isn't enough to protect those you cherish most.
The legal battle, if you can call it that, eventually concluded with a bittersweet decree. The court ruled in Clara's favor, granting her full custody, citing her demonstrable sobriety and stable living situation. My years of raising Leo were acknowledged, but ultimately deemed insufficient to override a biological mother's rights when she was deemed fit. It was a legal victory for Clara, but a devastating loss for me, and in many ways for Leo. The phased transition continued, each departure feeling like a fresh wound. Eventually, the alternating weeks turned into permanent residence with Clara, with scheduled weekend visitations for me. It was, and still is, a strange, fractured existence. I no longer live with the daily rhythm of Leo's life. I don't help him with his homework every night, don't tuck him in, don't wake to his excited chatter on a Saturday morning. Those quiet victories, those mundane joys, are now Clara's to experience. Initially, the bitterness was a corrosive force within me. I resented Clara for her disappearance, for her return, for her casual reclamation of a life she had discarded. I resented the legal system for its cold, impersonal judgment. I even, shamefully, resented the universe for allowing this injustice. I spent countless nights staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment, wondering what I could have done differently, what paperwork I should have filed, what legal loophole I might have missed. But grief, I've learned, is not a linear process. It ebbs and flows, transforms. Over time, the sharp edges of resentment began to dull, replaced by a profound sadness. I started therapy, an acknowledgement that I couldn't navigate this ocean of pain alone. My therapist helped me understand that while I had lost Leo in a legal sense, the love, the bond, the 7 years of raising him, those were indelible. No court order could erase them. My relationship with Clara is strained, to say the least. We speak only when necessary, often through strained texts or brief, polite phone calls about Leo's schedule or needs. There's a fragile truce, an unspoken agreement to prioritize Leo's well-being above our own unresolved issues. I see her sometimes when I pick up or drop off Leo, and I see a different woman. She looks healthier, more grounded. She's making an effort. And a small, grudging part of me, the sisterly part that never completely died, hopes she truly finds the peace and stability she now claims. Leo, he's still my sensitive, bright boy. The transition was incredibly difficult for him. He was confused, heartbroken, torn between 2 mothers. There were tears, tantrums, moments of profound sadness that broke my heart all over again. He struggled in school for a while, his grades dipping, his usually sunny disposition shadowed. But children are resilient, perhaps more so than adults. He's adapted. He now has 2 homes, 2 families. He calls Clara Mom, and he calls me Aunt Alice, though sometimes in a quiet moment when we're alone, he'll still whisper, Mommy. Those moments are my lifeline. The life lesson I've learned, etched deep into my soul, is this. Love is not about ownership. It's about nurture. It's about sacrifice. It's about being present day in and day out, through thick and thin. I raised Leo with every ounce of my being, and that doesn't disappear because of a judge's gavel. My identity as his mother was forged in sleepless nights and joyful mornings, in scraped knees and bedtime stories. It lives in my heart, and I believe in his. I've had to find acceptance, not necessarily of the outcome, but of the reality. I cannot control Clara's choices, nor the legal system's rulings, but I can control my response. I can choose to continue loving Leo fiercely, unconditionally, in whatever capacity I am allowed. I can choose to be a steadfast, loving presence in his life, his constant. My house is still too quiet sometimes. The echoes of his laughter still haunt the empty spaces. But now, when I look at that faded photograph on the mantelpiece, I no longer feel just grief. I see love, pure, powerful love. I see the boy I raised, the years I poured into him, the person he is becoming, and I realize that while I may have lost him in one sense, I gained something immeasurable, the profound, transformative experience of unconditional motherhood. It's a bittersweet existence, living with this constant ache, this phantom limb of a child who is both present and absent, but it's also a testament to resilience, to the enduring power of the human heart to love even in loss. My story isn't about a happy ending where everything is resolved neatly. It's about finding a different kind of peace, a quiet strength in the messy, complicated, often heartbreaking reality of family. And it's about holding on to the truth that love, true love, transcends all boundaries, legal or otherwise.